excited to be back with another recipe with 100% DeBruycker Charolais beef. So what I'm going to do for you today is actually short ribs. And these are one of my family's favorite recipes to do. And it's still a little bit chilly outside. I know it's spring, however, it's Montana, which means we can still have snow. And we do. So what I'm going to do is just kind of prep these short ribs. We're just going to try and get, like, if there's a membrane there, we want to remove that because I'm going to sear these in the cast iron pan. I've got a cast iron Dutch oven, and I'm going to sear them back there and really get a beautiful crust. So these are going to be, I'm going to red wine braise these short ribs and kind of show you a couple of different things that I like to do. But then they're going to go in the oven for about 2 hours. It just kind of depends, and I'll show you how you want to test that and so forth. But first we want to sear it off. So I really want to get the meat, some of the meat kind of connected to that pan and develop some beautiful flavors. So this is literally just fat, and I'm okay with that 100%. So I'm going to leave that on there and see some of these others, if I need to kind of take off some of that harsher membrane and so forth. I'm just going to kind of work through that and prep those out. And then we're going to season them really well with my steak seasoning. When we're developing that crust, here's another important thing. You want to make sure that these have been out of the refrigerator. So these have been kind of coming to room temp for at least an hour. And the biggest reason is if you really want to get that crust developed in your pan, you don't want cold meat to hit the hot pan, because then it immediately cools the pan off and you don't have a good connection to the pan to get that sear. So that you want them to be room temp and then in a hot cast iron skillet, seasoned and so forth. So let's get all of these prepped out and get ready to sear them off. Some oil, but while that's heating up, let me prep these short ribs. So I've trimmed that all off. Now I'm just going to add some of my steak seasoning to them, and I want to kind of get a nice liberal coat. So just kind of dress those, and then we're going to do it on all sides, because one of the things that I'm going to do when I'm searing is I'm going to sear on all sides, not just the top side. So we want to flip those over. We're going to get some of those nice caramelized bits going. Just that side. And then even the edges, I'm going to sear the edges too. So also know that the bones on these short ribs, one of the gorgeous things about this is how the marrow is going to kind of work out of those bones and is adding even more flavor to your sauce. Our onion and carrot and celery, they are going to be completely cooked down and softened, and we're going to be able to blend those all up with an immersion blender and create this wonderful sauce. And then I'm going to pair this with a root vegetable puree. You can do it with mashed potatoes or any type of kind of a starch. I love to do even some butter noodles or something like that. Leftovers on this works great with butter noodles as well. Or you can make like a bolognese with some of the leftovers. This meat is so decadent and rich when it's braised. It's just beautiful. So I love the fact that I know the way this beef was raised. It's really important to understand, you know, especially now, where our food comes from. And so DeBruycker Charolais do a great job of sustainably raising all of the Charolais cattle, and they do it hormone-free, grass-fed in beautiful clear skies of Montana. And then they grain finish it with locally sourced grain that they had developed that specifically brings out the natural beefiness flavor of this 100% Charolais beef. So it's a beautiful program, and if you want to learn more, you can go to dcmeats.com and really learn a lot more about where the meat's coming from and how it's raised. Okay, so that is smoking and good and hot. So I'm going to actually start on the edges. One of the easiest things to do is just kind of use your product to help hold up the other pieces in there. All of those beautiful seared short ribs. Yum. And now I'm just going to remove them. I've washed this prep pan, so I'm just going to remove these and set them over here. And then with all of this beautiful rendered, remember I left some of that fat on there because I wanted to not only enjoy it, we're using it to sweat our mirepoix. So I'm going in with onion, and carrot, and celery. So just a traditional mirepoix. And you know, if you've watched some of my other episodes, we want to season this layer too. I'm going to go into my salt well. And I'm going to kind of liberally season this because this is quite a bit of mirepoix because we're really going to sweat that down. And we're building all of these flavors to really create that for the sauce. So after those kind of soften a bit, then I'm going to add some garlic, and we're going to finish off. I'm going to add deglaze with some of this red wine, and then I'm going to reduce it down. So I just want to kind of burn off some of that alcohol and get the beautiful notes of that burgundy that I want. It's sweating down in that beautiful rendered fat from the Charolais beef. So it's going to be delicious and tasty. But this also matters what pot you use. So I love my Dutch oven because this is my grandmother's Dutch oven, and may she rest in peace, but I love to use my Dutch oven for this. But the amount, the size of your pan, and the size of the protein that you're putting in it will determine how much liquid, okay? And the amount of liquid is also kind of matters because you want to reduce it down to be able to have the sauce. So the amount of your mirepoix and veg and so forth that is going to be your natural thickener for the amount of liquid that you put in. The size of the pot matters. If I had a huge old, what we call chili pot, or when I was a kid, it was the spaghetti pot. The size of that pan will matter because you don't want to have so much liquid. So I want to make sure that the portion sizes that I'm going to cook will fit inside and not have too much extra space. Okay, so those are softened really good. I'm going to add my garlic now. So I just have minced garlic, and I'm going to add that in and let that kind of sweat and get the aromatic going. Okay, so now that those have sweated down, I'm going to go in with some tomato paste. So I'm just going to let that tomato paste kind of saute it, and it's going to get rich and deeper in flavor. And then I'm going to go in with my Worcestershire. Perfect. And now what I'm going to do is go in with, probably a couple of cups of nice burgundy wine. You want a deep red wine. So we're going to go in with a couple of cups. And essentially, when I am done, I'll reduce that down. Just, maybe not quite to a half, but just enough to be able to reduce out some of that harsh alcohol. And then after I'm gonna bring that all up to a boil, and after I reduce that down a little bit, then I'm gonna go in with my stock. And then we're going to add our short ribs, our beautiful 100% Charolais beef short ribs, back in, covering it tightly, and then it's gonna go in the oven. I'm gonna add some bay leaf, and then also I'm gonna use some of my herb seasoning. So I have so many different things that's already in this herb seasoning. If you don't have my Montana Flavor to Savor herb seasoning, you can use just some other of your dry herbs like oregano, thyme, rosemary, but this has all of that in there, plus a little bit of your salt and your pepper. So remember, we always season each layer, so I put that wine in. So now I'm actually going to use my dry herbs. Perfect. And get those in there and blooming. And like I said, I'm also going to add a bay leaf. But a lot of everything that I want in the flavor is in my herb seasoning. So I seasoned the meat with the steak seasoning, and now I'm seasoning the sauce with the herb seasoning. So perfect. It's starting to come up to a simmer, and then we'll go in with our stock and our bay leaf. Okay, so I added in the stock and the bay leaf. Now I'm going to take my short ribs, my seared beautiful short ribs, and put them back in there. I brought all of that up to another simmer, because when I go into the oven, I want the product to be hot. So I am nestling my short ribs on top of all of that mirepoix, and see, they're just barely covering it. And now I'm going to put a tight lid on it. And if you don't have a heavy lid, like I have here with my Dutch oven, you can always do like a little bit of tin foil around the edges and really seal in that. Now I'm going to take this over to a hot 300-degree oven, and I'm going to put that in there. So now that those are in the oven, it's going to take probably 2 hours or so. It might take a little longer, it might take a little less. When we bring it out of the oven, we're going to test it at an hour and a half. And if it's fork tender, that's how you can tell. You put a fork in there, and if it starts to kind of shred a little bit, then you're ready. You're done. If it's not shredding easily with a fork, go back in for another half hour. And also you can test see what your levels of liquid are at, because you want to make sure that it's at that right level. You never want to go below the protein. You need to have it at least halfway of that protein after it's kind of reduced and cooked down a little bit. Get ready on my side. So what I'm going to pair that with is, I already told you I was going to do my root vegetable puree, and I'm doing rutabagas. So what I'm doing here is getting the Brussels sprouts ready. So when I bring the short ribs out of the oven and let that rest, and while I'm pureeing the mirepoix and the sauce, I'm going to pop these in the oven. So all I've done is I've taken the tips off, halved them, and then here's the thing I'm going to do that's kind of fun. So I have taken 2 slices of Montana bacon, and what I'm going to do is make sure this is touching the pan, okay? Because these are going to get caramelized and crispy, but the fat that's going to render is actually also going to kind of permeate and help my Brussels sprouts. So I'm just going to kind of put these on one end, and then I'm going to actually toss my Brussels sprouts with just a little bit more olive oil, just to kind of help the situation and help them soften and brown the way I want. And then just a pinch of salt and pepper. There's going to be some salt in that bacon, so I don't need to do a lot. You get my pepper. Awesome. And then I'm also going to do, I've taken a shallot and just thin sliced it. And I'm going to add them on top of the bacon because we're wanting to get that beautiful caramelized fat from the bacon. And then that will help caramelize your shallots. It's going to add amazing flavor when it's all tossed together. I'm also going to add, I've got a couple of cloves of garlic that I minced. So same thing, I'm going to put that over here with my bacon. Awesome. And now I'm just going to toss these. And then the best thing to do with your cut vegetables, so the reason that you want to cut them in half is that hits your pan and they get beautifully caramelized. Roasted Brussels sprouts are one of those things that's amazing. That wonderful flavor, but it pairs really well to relieve the palate of something that's rich and decadent, like our red wine braised short ribs. I'm just going to set them aside to when I'm getting ready to pull out my short ribs, and then I'll increase the heat, because that's the other thing with Brussels sprouts. You do want to have these cook at a higher temperature. So your oven temperature kind of depends on the size of your veg and the timing. So technically the way that they consider it is the smaller the piece, the hotter the oven. So if you're trying to figure out how to really get those beautiful caramelized, the smaller the piece, the hotter the oven. I like to do my halved Brussels sprouts at about 400. So I'm going to increase the temp because I've been braising those short ribs at 300. So I'm going to increase that temp to 400, and then I'm going to pop these all in. In the end, I'm going to toss them with a couple more really interesting, fun things to again bring out that beautiful flavor and pair it with our full entree. So keep watching while I get these set aside, and then let's go work on our rutabagas. Okay, so while our short ribs are finishing up in the oven, let's get our rutabaga going. And what I'm going to do is actually sweat a little onion with a little butter in there, and then we're going to add our diced up rutabaga in stock. And if you don't know the difference between a rutabaga and a rutabaga has yellow on the skin on the outside, and turnips are white with red or yellow with red. Rutabaga is the yellow with red. And rutabaга's got a little bit more starch, so they'll make a beautiful puree easier. So that's melted down. I'll go in with probably, I've got about half of an onion here, kind of fine diced. And what that's going to do is it's going to add just an amazing flavor to our rutabaga puree. So I'm going to add just a pinch of salt to that. So I've got the onion in there sweated, and then I added in the rutabaga with just enough of that stock to cover the rutabaga. And then we're going to bring it up to a boil, and then as soon as it comes to a boil, we'll reduce it down to a simmer. One of the things with starchy vegetables, especially potatoes, if you boil it, then it breaks down the starch on the outside of the potato, and you get that kind of mush because it's cooking the outside faster than it's cooking the interior of your chunk of potato. So bring it up to a boil, but then you want to simmer it. Simmer starchy root vegetables like potatoes and rutabagas. So we're gonna get everything put together here. One of the things that I like to do is when I am garnishing or adding that extra little herb or freshness pop to something that's really kind of rich, you know, I'll use parsley, but in this case, because I've got celery in the mirepoix, that I actually saved my celery greens, and that is what I'm going to add to my red wine braised short ribs from DC Meats. So I'm gonna lift that off. Oh man, it smells amazing in here. I'm telling you. So I'm gonna actually add a few of these right to that sauce, and I'll stir it all in, but I'm gonna save some back to dress the top of the plate. So let me show you here what I'm gonna do with my Brussels sprouts, because these are amazing and caramelized. So I've got both the bottom and the top, and how I did that was, so I don't know if you saw how I put it in the oven on the top rack. So the heat from the top of the oven will roast the top of your Brussels sprouts, while the pan and the heat underneath will roast the cut side. So it's just kind of an easy way to get a little bit of caramelization on both sides. Now what I want to do with this is I'm going to add just a little bit of pure maple syrup, just a little. We just want to add just a little bit of sweetness. And then I'm going to go in with some barrel-aged balsamic vinegar. We're going to toss that in there. And then here is another little thing. I'm going to get my zester here. I have got peppadews. So they're sweet peppadews. So they're just kind of a little, they're not really that spicy hot, but they're kind of an interesting little pepper to add on to things. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to toss some of those with these Brussels sprouts as well. So you're getting some more color as well. I'm just going to go ahead. That was probably four peppadews. You're going to get some flavor with that as well. And then we're going to do a little bit of lemon zest. Because again, we want that pop of freshness to cut through some of that richness, especially with the maple syrup and the bourbon barrel-aged balsamic vinegar. I want to have just a little bit of freshness with that. So I'm just going to toss those things together, and then we're going to get ready to plate. Oh, that looks amazing. I better try one of these just to make sure I'm happy. Gotta have a little bit of all of those unctuous little bits in the bottom of that sheet pan too. The balsamic vinegar and the maple syrup just adds this amazing sweetness that really pairs off of the acidic levels of the Brussels sprouts and that zest and so forth. So this is awesome. I love the peppadews in there as well. I'm going to add just a pinch more salt and then get everything put together. Okay, so we have here our Rutabaga Puree. And it's just one of those extra little things. So, you know, we always do like potatoes. Sometimes it's nice to add just an extra little something with vegetables and do it in a different way than just like roasting or so forth. So I love to do it this way. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do this on a half and half side. So I'm going to plate part of my Brussels sprouts on top of that on one side. Oh, yum. Make sure I get some of those roasty bits. I love the little leaves. Leave those loose and let them roast, because that just adds another little kind of nutty and roasty flavor. So it's such a good element. I love it. Clean that plate up. I'm gonna set these aside. So you're gonna love this. DeBruycker Charolais and just honestly that 100% Charolais beef is so flavorful. It's amazing. So I'm gonna add one of those out here, put it right on top, and then we're gonna top dress with a little bit of this sauce. Gravy sauce, whatever you want to call it. Don't leave it off. It's amazing. Wonderful. And then just maybe a little bit of pop of the fresh celery, and we're good to go. Now, I think I'm going to take a taste of this before my family gets in. I can probably hide that. So, oh, just fork tender, pulls right off of that bone. See, that bone just comes right off. It's absolutely amazing. Yum. Wow. So I've made this dish so many times over the years, but you can really tell when you're using quality meat. And this is the real deal. This is dry aged Charolais beef, and it is so flavorful, beefy, just amazing amount of flavor that you're getting there. And it's such a beautiful program. I love what they're doing at DeBruycker Charolais in Dutton, Montana. So make sure you make this recipe for your friends and your family. The link will be included in this post. Thanks for watching.